Hi friends, welcome to my channel. My name is Kat and I really like to read. So today's just going to be like a really quick video going over the 10 worst books that I read from quarter 1. If you don't know, I read a lot of sci-fi, I read a lot of fantasy, and while there's definitely a lot of wins, there's, always a significant amount of fails too, because I have read like over 100 books in the first quarter, so there's a bell curve of where we're going to fall on enjoyment. So I'm just going to talk about 10 of them that didn't quite work for me. Some of these, they weren't terrible. There's like some that I even enjoyed. It just, some part of it didn't fully work out, and there's just something there that's not allowing me to say that this was a book that I actually really enjoyed. So there'll be no particular order to what I'm sharing, but pretty much all of them are sci-fi fantasy. So if you are interested, get ready, I guess. So the first book I have to talk about is The Genesis of Misery by Neon Yang. And I initially read this because the video's coming, I promise, but I read all of the 20 nominees for the Goodreads Best of Sci-Fi last year, and this was one of them. So I always go into that very hopeful that if it's on that list, it should be something more enjoyable. But this could be in the running for worst book I've read this year. So this is essentially like a Joan of Arc retelling in which Misery is becoming this like saint-like figure within their universe. So it's like a huge galaxy of planets, and she possesses this unique power that is basically deemed her as a saint right away. And she like goes to the center of this empire, which is this huge galaxy, and becomes involved in a type of war. So that alone, that sounds wonderful. That sounds very interesting. Like, I like sci-fi books that have like big expansive galaxies and you're following like a bunch of different planets, maybe some weird powers, that kind of thing. But something about this just like fell so flat for me. Like, I think part of it is we're in Misery's head for the majority of the book, and I didn't necessarily like her as a character. Like, I don't know, I didn't enjoy being there. I didn't enjoy the atmosphere necessarily. I felt like a lot of the descriptions about the powers and what this meant on society were very lacking, and it just left me in like a state of confusion basically the entire time. And the plot of the book was very sequential in that it was just like she has powers, she goes trains, she like solves this like big war thing, and that I don't mind. I'm like very much here sometimes for a formulaic book if it works well. This one just really did not. It just felt like it was dragging in that way, and because so many of these aspects I wasn't enjoying, it felt so much more like it was, I don't know, like nothing original, even though it was in so many ways. And this is one of the few books that I just really found boring. It dragged so much for me. It wasn't that long a book, but it dragged like crazy. I'd initially tried to read it physically, and I got like 2 pages in before I was like, this is terrible, I can't do it. So then I tried to listen to it on audio. It was slightly better that way, but I just like wanted to do basically anything else instead of keep going through this one. So that makes me feel terrible, but I really did not enjoy this one, and that is the first book from this list. Book number 2 is what made me realize that monster romance traumatizes me. So I read The Dragon's Bride by Katie Robert, and I have never been that horrified in my life by, just like imagining what happens. So essentially there's this woman who sells herself to a demon in exchange for help in whatever issue she needed, and as part of it, she's auctioned off a bride to a dragon king. And we do mean dragon, like physically a dragon, and it's just a romance from there. And getting past the fact that, I don't know, I just really don't like monster romances. I don't like that romanticization of it. I don't like that. But even getting past that, it was just very insta-love, and there was no relationship development whatsoever. It was a novella, but usually there's still something to make you root for the characters or something that you can see why they care for each other. And this one I did not whatsoever. It seemed like the only thing they actually cared about was the sexual relationship, and nothing else in the relationship actually mattered to them. So this was a very strong fail for me. So possibly the most disappointing on this list, just in terms of the of sheer description and the potential that I feel like this book had, is Winterworld by A.G. Riddle. So in this one, we are following an Earth where a new ice age has begun. There's this massive freezing event that is taking over the planet and essentially causing everything to rapidly freeze and Earth to very quickly become unlivable. So it is suspected that perhaps something in space is causing causing this? Maybe something's blocking the sun, something like that. So a group of scientists are sent into space and discover that there is this other seemingly hostile alien race who has attacked our planet and sent in these molecules that cause rapid freezing. That is so interesting. That is wonderful. That is like the most fascinating idea ever, but somehow it completely missed the mark. One of the most annoying things is I wanted this book to be on Earth. I wanted it to be people who are dealing with this freezing. How are they living? How is it affecting like the world, the general person, whatever. Instead, almost the entire book takes place in space while they are traveling through the galaxy to try and find this like foreign substance that's attacking them and try and like make contact with these aliens, and nothing comes from that. It's basically just they are sitting in space for so long, and it is not that interesting, unfortunately. The writing itself too, it weirdly felt like a screenplay in the sense that it was very abrupt and a lot of like, I don't know, it felt like this was trying to be written as a movie, and it did not work obviously as a book. And I don't get the understand the writing choice, because I've read from AJ Riddle before and I really enjoyed some of their work, but somehow this one just was like leaps and bounds behind, which maybe it's just because it was an older book. I didn't believe a lot of the relationships that happened. There's a love story that like I do not believe whatsoever. You're basically just telling me that someone's in love is again not enough to believe that. I don't know. I couldn't connect with anything that was happening and I found it incredibly boring. I think this one is the most disappointing just because I feel like it could have been so much better and maybe it just like wasn't the book I actually wanted to read. Blue Ticket by Sophie McIntosh. So this takes place in a dystopian world where the government has decided to take away any choice from women for what their future is. When you hit puberty, you go to a testing center and you either draw a white ticket or a blue ticket. So a white ticket essentially means you are going to be a mother and that is going to be your life. Blue ticket, you are unable to have children and you will be a worker for the rest of your life. So we're following one woman, Kala, as she selects a blue ticket, and from there, the rest of her life as she like desperately realizes that she wants a child and wishes she had a choice in her life. I really wanted to like this book. You could kind of look at it as like empowerment of women in that they are really like it's just a woman who wants to make her own way in life and have decisions open to do whatever she wants to do. But just it was not interesting. There's just like so many points that I couldn't get behind, and I just really didn't find the writing good either. There didn't feel like there was enough like world building, so there's no description given to us about why this happened, what is going on in this dystopian world for women to be forced into this type of life. Like we got no information whatsoever, and that was really frustrating because like it would have been really cool to see if it was like some authoritarian government who like really did not believe in women's rights. We can assume it is, but we don't know for sure. Maybe it's overpopulation has led to only certain women being able to reproduce, but again, we don't know any information, so it kind of ruined the story in that sense for me because I like to know things. I like if we're going into a dystopian story, I want to know what is causing this destruction, what is causing people to live that way. Yeah, and going back to about what I didn't like about the writing, I found it was very, I don't want to say boring, but it was very like dull. It was flat. It didn't lack any like emotion behind it. So despite knowing that this was Kala's, this is all she wanted and this is everything that she was aiming for in life, I really just didn't feel anything for her because the writing had no emotion whatsoever, and that really took me out of the story. So this is one that like as I was reading it, I was like, I should really DNF it, but it was only like 200 pages, so I just like pushed through. But I really did not like this. This one by no means is terrible. So it's This Time Tomorrow by Emma Straub. This was not terrible at all, and I could see a lot of people liking it. It just really was not for me. So we're following Alice on her 40th birthday. She goes to sleep in this shed and then wakes up on her 16th birthday and realizes that if she made decisions maybe that are different, she could solve all of the regrets that she had lived with her whole life and then go forward to a new year. And we're basically just following her as she goes back and forth from 40 to 16 and is just trying to like figure out what she wants in life. She's just continuously going back and correcting one thing and then going back to 40 and realizing, no, this life isn't actually perfect. Yeah, it wasn't for me. I found it really dragged. It wasn't that great. I got really bored of the continuous going back and forth and just like telling what her new life would be of like, oh, this is the one thing I changed and now I'm married with kids, or oh, now I'm like this type of job, blah, blah, blah. Like I didn't find that very interesting. I didn't really enjoy it all that much, and it really just did drag on quite a bit. Super short too, but it just really didn't have enough substance in it, in my opinion, to really like want me to keep enjoying it that much. And this is such a random aside, but I really was taken out of the story about the fact that she had the same family cat at 16 as 40, and cats don't live that long, guys. Like, and the way they were describing the 16-year-old, like the cat when she was 16, was that they'd already had her for several years. Like, there's no way the cat is that old. And every single time she was mentioned, it took me so out of the story, and that was just such a random aside that I could not get past. After the flood takes place about 100 years in the future, where raising water levels has essentially made the majority of the land unlivable, and at this point a lot of people have to live on boats or like boat communities to be able to get by, because otherwise there's like nothing for them. So we're following this one woman who, she and her daughter are just traveling through trying to find her older daughter, who was kidnapped by her husband about 10 years before, and just all she cares about is finding her daughter and bringing her back with her. The world building in this one was actually immaculate, and I'm incredibly impressed by it, because I don't know, it gives you that vibe of like, imagine Mad Max, but there's too much water instead of not enough, you know? Like, you're entirely on these water plants, these water like communities, and like pirates run rampant. There's communities of like, yeah, there's just like all of these communities trying to rebuild life, but also so many that are trying to destroy it. And like, it was really interesting in that sense. I just did not necessarily like the plot that much, or the writing. The characters weren't really that likable. They were just kind of like a little irritating in a lot of sentences. Like, I didn't enjoy any of them. I didn't think they were that great. They were kind of just there, and I found them fairly annoying, unfortunately. And I just wasn't really that engaged in the story past the initial world building. That was definitely the best part for me. I thought that was the most interesting, and the only part that I really enjoyed keep going on. Besides that, the story was kind of not that interesting. It was like a fun adventure for sure. It just didn't really have enough going on for me to like really be that into it, or really want to keep going, you know? So the next book, To Sleep in a Sea of Stars by Christopher Paolini. I'm not really going to get that much into the plot of this one because it was massively convoluted, but essentially we're following a scientist who comes in contact with an alien substance on a planet, and then it essentially forms this exoskeleton over her body, and from there like sends off warning signs to other alien creatures to come and attack Earth because it's transmitting something. The first 300 or 400 pages of this book, I was so invested. I was loving every moment of it. It was so interesting, so fascinating. I love like a first contact story. Those usually tend to be like really like consistently good for me, except this one dragged on for so long, and it was so not necessary. So it ended up, I think it was a 900 page book, and it should not have been that. It should have been like maybe 500 at the most, because there's just so many like long drawn out battle scenes, like a lot of strategy about how like there's two different alien races, and let's try to attack this one and go with this one, and blah blah blah. And that itself is interesting. It's good. It just really dragged on, and if it had been shorter, I think this would have been such a higher rating for me. Like, this is one of the few on the list that I actually did enjoy quite a bit. It just was way too long, and not enough happened to really justify that in my mind. So The Red Scholar's Wake, I read as one of my Illumicrate books for this year. It came out in the December 2022 Illumicrate book. It was marketed as a sapphic space opera following pirates and like pirates in space, and everything about that sounds fascinating. It sounds amazing, and it did not match any of that. It was so boring. It was so convoluted. It lacked like any emotion. The conversations felt so stilted and uninteresting, and yeah, there's just like not very many things that I can say about this book that were actually positive, because so much of it was not great for me. And I'm deeply disappointed in it. I didn't like the characters. I didn't believe their relationship. I thought they had like some of the most uninteresting dialogue I've ever read. And I feel like the longer I've gone since I've read this one, the less I'm liking it. But if you're interested in more thoughts about it, I'll link the video up here of that reading vlog, because it was not great. And then the last book I have to talk about, so apparently I only wrote down 9 instead of 10, oops. But this one is Kingdom of Stars and Shadows by Renee something. Holly Renee. This was just like the most basic fantasy romance I've ever read in my life. Nothing happened, nothing new happened. It was the most formulaic book I've ever read. It was so boring. And yeah, it was just like take every popular trope of fantasy books and throw them all in together, and hopefully something will stick. But yeah, everything everything just ended up being kind of uninspired and uninteresting. Yeah, like I would say that's probably the most boring fantasy romance I've read in ages, and it literally feels like every other book you could imagine, every other book that's come out in however recently. Like there was just nothing to like set it apart from anything, and I really did not enjoy it. That one, despite being like 200 pages, it took me forever to get through because I just did not care. So there's, I guess, the 9 worst books I read in quarter 1. I didn't really want to go into too much detail about any of these, or really like drag on about my problems about them, because I feel bad roasting books. But there you go. Those are the ones that didn't work for me. I'll have another video up soon going over my 10 best from quarter 1, and I hope you guys are interested. If you haven't already, please subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.